Hello everyone, Deanna here, and thanks so much for being here. So, today, the book we're going to get into is going to be Prince Harry's memoir, Spare. This one just came out in January. I had it on pre-order and I listened to it by audiobook, and I'm already done it in the month of January, which is pretty awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and share some of my thoughts on Spare. So sit tight and let's get into it. So typically in these book review videos, I usually have a summary of the book that I write out. I didn't do that for Spare. I think partly it's because, one, how do I summarize like all of this book in like a very nice way other than to pretty much say it's Prince Harry. It's literally something that's probably never been done before. I don't know if this has ever really been done before, in that a member, a close, like very close to royal family member, one of the main prominent family members of the royal family, came out so vocally to share their own story and to have it there in their own words, even though it was ghost written. I do know that this one was ghost written by another author, but it was still Prince Harry. It was Prince Harry's story. He had to rubber stamp that. I mean, it was his voice that auto narrated it. So clearly he had some say in this, and this is what his thoughts were on this story and his life too. This isn't just a story, this isn't some fantasy, even though we love to think of the royal family and princes and princesses as this like wild fantasy. This is a real person at the core of it. This is a real person that went through a lot of his own things, some of them good, some of them bad, some of them way too publicized for the whole world to scrutinize and review. And even just doing this book review in some ways is like feeding a bit into that, but is fascinating in some ways. I mean, I don't know where we really have it in history too much where it's in their own words, where they are saying it to us and telling the public kind of what their point of view is. We'll never 100% get it, I think, to a point where he's going to be completely like tell everything, because I don't think anyone in history could ever tell every single thing about their life without like a play-by-play from the moment they're born, Truman style or something. Like, you're not gonna get a person's complete inner working mind and all of their thoughts and all of what has happened to them, but you're gonna get what they are putting out. And I think, as much as others might criticize or have their own opinion, I think Prince Harry is being as authentic as he can be. He is coming through this in a way of, he wants to set the record straight. He wants to have it in his own voice, because anything he has said has been twisted so much his whole life. Anything any of his family has said has been filtered and put through something where there's approvals that have to be done, and probably briefings that are done, and reviews just for them to put out a statement. It probably goes through so many levels of government and the checks and balances to make sure that they're coming off in the right official way and that they're not ruffling the wrong feathers and things like that. Like that, to have that pressure on you all the time is exhausting. It must be so incredibly exhausting, and I think that is what came through the most in Harry's memoir. I think that honestly what came through the most is how much he's hurting from it, is how much this has really affected him mentally, emotionally, you know, in a way that he has a lot of distrust of others. He can't even really trust his own family. He loves his family. You can tell even through his anger and through some of the things he says of like maybe Prince Will, his own brother, that yeah, there's moments where he's kind of peed off, and maybe he doesn't come through 100%. Maybe he's not quite as innocent. Like, I'm sure Harry had his own side, and I'm sure Will has his own side of stories. Like, we all do. We all have our own view on what happened. There's always 3 sides to a story, right? There's your side, their side, and there's the truth. And it's sometimes just finding where you can reconcile all of that together. Like, that's very much, I think, what's happening, and it's just gonna be what happens when people tell their memoir, especially when it's a memoir like this that is such on a huge scale where everyone's gonna be scrutinizing it, because so many people have so many opinions about the royal family, good or bad, and have so many thoughts about Harry. Even people that don't care, even people that do not follow the royal family and think this is all just hogwash, that is their opinion. Their opinion is that this is all hogwash. Why is it such a big deal? Why are we even caring about this royal family or this situation? That is an opinion that you have. Because honestly, I do not think you can be someone in our societies, especially if you're part of the Commonwealth like Canada is. You have been somehow impacted by the royal family, and whether you know all of their ins and outs and who is who, maybe you don't know all of that, but they have shaped history. Like the English, the British have shaped history in some way or another. Again, good or bad, there are some debates on both sides, but they have influenced where the world is right now. You cannot say that they are not one of the big powerhouses of the world. That they just are. They are. That's the honest truth. Again, how they got to that point, or whether that's whatever, that's part of the discussion, because it is kind of, I think, what drives Harry to push out on his own and branch out on his own. But it's also a bit of like, that's a big story that could take eons to probably rip through that. Honestly, right now, what I'm just focusing on is this memoir, is the review of what I thought of his memoir. And I honestly thought that there were times when this memoir really broke my heart, listening to this man talk about his life and his family and the impacts it has had on him, and most of all his mum. I mean, the way he talks about his mummy, and I mean, he even says mummy throughout the whole book pretty much, about Princess Diana, one of the most iconic women in, you know, the 21st century, that she was someone that was taken much too soon in such a tragic and horrific way, and just what poor Prince Will and poor Prince Harry had to do to represent the crown in, like, oh, they had to be there for the people. Like, these were children that were grieving about the loss of their beautiful mother, and they're having to be paraded around to, like, help the public deal with it. Like, to me, that was some of the horrific part of it. I mean, I was just very, very young when that all happened myself, and so to see poor Harry, like, have to go through that and then relive it kind of for us in a way to tell us his side and what he was kind of going through at that point, and how he didn't even really know how to take it. He didn't believe it as much, because how could that be real? How could someone that you love so much and need so much be gone? Like, that, oh, that part broke me. That part, just hearing him talk about his mom and how that really affected him was pretty emotional. And then to have that duality in the spouse that he has of Meghan Markle, and again, that is a name that for some reason sparks so much division between just so many people. Like, there are some people that have some very strong opinions about Meghan Markle. I don't really get it. I don't understand why this woman irks these people so much. Like, I don't know if it's just the difference between British culture and American culture, and that she emulates American culture so much that they just abhor it so vehemently, and they're just so vocal about it to disgusting degrees. And then of course, like, getting into like the racism and all of that horribleness that is spewed at her, whether they believe it or not. It is, like, whether those are bots or whatever they are, there has been tweets, there has been messages, there has been things that have just been so horrible at what has been spewed all over this poor woman, when all she was doing was loving a man. Like, honestly, whether you think that she loves him for money, there are so many women in this, and men, people in this world that marry for money. Why the heck are we all over her, if that even was why she married Prince Harry? Which I don't think that is. That is my opinion. I think they are two people that had a lot in common and found each other and fell in love, and they love each other. Like, I don't think they could go and stay together to this extreme without having love for each other and without strongly loving each other, because that is a lot to go through. That is a lot to have that much hostility and just vile things thrown at you from so many parts of the world, whether you're Meghan and that's coming towards you because you've married the prince, or whether you're the prince and that's coming at you because you've married Meghan. Like, there has to be love that is connecting these two together to fight through this, to say, like, no, our love is strong enough that we can get through this. Because I don't think if it wasn't drawn together by that love and like solidified by that love, I think it would have fallen apart already. I honestly think so, because that is a huge upheaval that they both went through on such a national, like, international scale. Like, nations are like commenting on their love and their relationship, and just to have your relationship scrutinized at that level, and things that are brought up about you that are probably from your past that are, whether or not they're even true, because not everything you see in the media is true. Not everything that you see posted all over the place is true. And that's on both sides. Like, not everything is going to make them this wonderful, loving, amazing couple, but they're also not like these horrible scums of the earth either. I don't think it's that extreme on either end. They are humans. They are people that have their flaws and have their strengths, and that they go through their trials and their triumphs, and they're just trying to live their lives in a lot of ways. And again, whether it's like, oh, well, they're just trying to make money. Like, are you effing kidding me sometimes? Who the F isn't trying to make money sometimes in today's world? Like, I'm sorry. With some of the, like, what, how are you not just trying to ensure that you have stability and have comfort? And when you're at that level of notoriety and fame, you're gonna need more money to protect yourself more, to ensure you have safeguards in place that are protecting you and your family, because how absolutely ridiculous it is at that grand scale. Like, it is such a huge scale of just attention and people knowing about them and all of their ins and outs in so many ways, the paparazzi and all of that horribleness that comes with it, that, yeah, you're gonna want some money. You're gonna want some way to be able to protect those assets. And sometimes that asset is your own neck, and making sure that you are protected and the people you love, their family is protected. And the fact that they don't, I mean, Meghan gave up her role. She was an actress. She could have gone on probably to do bigger roles. And she had to kind of put that aside to step forward in this relationship with Harry and see where it went, because there are, I'm sure, a lot of protocols and just legislation and rules and things that are beyond our even understanding or knowledge, because it's not for everyday people to know about. She had to put all of that on hold to pursue this relationship with him. So I don't know. I don't want to get too much into, I've already gone so far into some of my thoughts of Meghan and Harry, because it's just, to me, it's heartbreaking in so many ways. It's heartbreaking that we compare them so much all the time. They're always having things thrown at them of like, oh, you did this, but, oh, but, and like, or like, look at the horribleness. Like, there are so many things that were shoved at them and pushed at them. And I'm sure even I couldn't imagine waking up, going to the store, and seeing my face on magazines there. And seeing it say stuff that is so twisted and so ridiculous. I mean, we know, like, or at least without saying we, I will say I know, having been someone that would have I loved picking up those magazines as a teenager and as a young adult. I was right into who's dating who and who's seeing who and what's kind of going on. And then of course with social media coming out more, and you get to actually see a bit more of these people, these celebrities, kind of telling you things, whether it's like in their own words or their social media people or whatever, but it contradicts sometimes what you're seeing on the magazines, and it makes you go, which one is true? And you know what? I'm sure there's some truth to some of the magazine articles on some of these celebrities, like even the Prince and Meghan, but there's also a lot that's just made up, and a lot that's just driving forward for clicks and for engagement and for people to sell magazines. I mean, why are we not condemning the media more on what they're doing? Because they have taken it to such an extreme. Look what they did to Britney Spears. Look what they've done to like so many other celebrities. Whether or not you can say, well, they put themselves in that position, that in some ways is an asinine argument, because in your job, if you had to put yourself out there in that way and have yourself ridiculed and criticized at every freaking turn you took, that would drive you bonkers no matter what. And like, so people are just not supposed to pursue arts and entertainment because, oh, there's a chance that you are going to end up infamous and have your life completely destroyed. Like, there's still people. There's still people at the end of the day. I'm ashamed in so many ways that I even played into that media consumption in the regards to consuming all of that content and those magazines and stuff. I feel so much shame that I even fed into some of that ridiculousness, and it makes me think anytime I'm going to search something, like even when I search on Google, do I really want to click on this link anymore? Do I really want to feed into that mentality of this obsession that we have of knowing every single detail about these people and having this huge engagement, when really at the end of the day, why do I need to know that about these people? They should just be able to live their life. And I know there's going to be some criticism, well, Harry and Meghan bring it on themselves by having the documentaries, by having the book come out, and you know, again, there's, I'm sure, a little bit of validness to that, because yes, if you want to be private, why are you sharing your stuff? But there's also the flip side of, why would you not want to set the record straight? Like, that would drive you mad, knowing that there's things out there that are so ridiculously wrong about you and your lifestyle, and you have no voice. You have no way to say differently, because you have been programmed your entire life to listen to a institution that monitors every single piece of information that comes and goes, and that is put together in such a way that you have no single autonomy anymore. You're not an individual. You're just part of the hive mind of the institution. And I think that would make some certain people want to very strongly rebel against that and fight that. I mean, do we not want to all be a bit of individuals, have our freedom, and be able to speak our piece, have our free speech? That's a lot of what we all very strongly hold in regard. So if that's taken away from you, what the heck do you do other than fight against it and try to set the record straight? So I'm not mad at them for wanting to do that. I do not think that there's anything wrong with them trying to want to do that. It is up to anyone else's, discretion, prerogative on whether they entertain it and read it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with them putting it out there to try to say their truth and what they experienced. And again, I've gone off on another tangent because apparently I just have a lot more to say about this than I even realized, but that all was very much the center of what his memoir was about in so many ways. It was about him trying to have his voice come out, being able to be the one who gets to set the narrative on his actual experiences and his point of view, and try to defend himself and the reasons for some of the actions that he took. And I don't fault him that. I think he is completely within his rights and his valid to do that. And I think there were certain points, to bring it back to like the actual writing of the story and kind of how the whole book of Spare went. There were a couple points that kind of sometimes were a little snoozy, like some of his military experience. But then also, it was so important to hear it because I think that's very much shaped him to who he is. And I couldn't imagine living with that. And I think he was so incredibly amazing in sharing his experience with PTSD that brought me to tears so much to hear what he went through, especially when he was such a big advocator for the support of mental health and trying to ensure that people are taking care of their own mental health. And then for him to have like an epiphany of like, oh my goodness, I'm not even looking after my own mental health, but yet I'm one of the advocates to promote taking care of mental health. Like how could he reconcile that and his struggle with that, and then his struggle with just so much of what he has come through. And some of it, yes, it was a little bit like, okay, like you're a prince that like you're so far off the average person's level. Like there's literally people dying of homelessness and hunger and like starvation and drug issues and so much poverty that you are like the extreme opposite of poverty. Like your family is worth like billions of dollars and like literally are like heads of a nation. Like how can you even compare in some ways? But at the same time, I think that's not entirely fair because that's his life experience, that this is what he has known. You don't know what you don't know. And I think what I appreciate with Prince Harry is he's trying to learn. He may not always get it right, and he's missed the mark a couple times. And he's very, very honest about that in his memoir, that there are sometimes he wishes he could take back because he knows he didn't do right. But he's trying, and I think that deserves a lot of credit. I did put a journal entry together. I did a bit of a play on the word spare. I think even Harry kind of meant for this to happen too. He's the spare. He was the spare his whole life. And he talks about that and he gets into that and he shares some of what his thoughts are on that. And I just thought it was kind of fun to play that like spare term from bowling and like make a picture of a bowling ball with a crown and the bowling pin, and Harry can knock him right down. But I had a lot of fun drawing this. The coloring didn't come out amazing, as you can see. Like, I'm not completely happy with some of how this came out. I'm not that great with using some of this. I used, I think, some brush pens, I believe, and then I also used a bit of like these pens too, mild liners. So I kind of was like using these. Probably not the greatest to use them together because they probably don't blend very well together, and that's why it kind of like doesn't look amazing. But you know what? I had some fun with it, and I still do like how it looks because I like the crown. I think I did a great job in this. Like, my very like limited artistic abilities, I used something circular to draw this, but I still like drew the crown and I drew the bowling pin, and I just think it looks pretty good considering. Proud me moment. And then I used I used a stencil to write the word spare, and then my hand lettering to write Prince Harry. And I've got my little audiobook indicator here because I read it by audiobook. Listening to this audiobook, like 10 out of 10. I would highly recommend listening to it in Prince Harry's voice because the tones that he used was awesome. Hearing it in his own voice and like hearing his words, again, even though they might be ghost written, it's still his story, his experience, and hearing him tell it was just like next level. It was just kind of like made the experience that much better. I really do love audiobooks for memoirs when it is narrated by the actual author or the person who the story is about, because they have the ability to really connect with the story and really make it really personable by having it in their own voice. So if you're ever able to listen to it by audiobook, I do recommend that, because if you have that ability to do that, it is really an awesome format to be able to listen to. It was really good. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know what else to say about this, because clearly I've got a lot of opinions that came out. I wasn't expecting to say half of that. It just was a lot of what I felt while I was reading this, while I was listening to it, what I was imagining, and just knowing some of what I've seen in the media and stuff like that. Yeah, it definitely felt. And getting that bit of that behind the scenes of Will, Kate, Meghan, and Harry really was interesting. Because, again, I think it's going to be a bit skewed because it's Harry's point of view. So maybe he was more forgiving for himself and Meghan's side. And I'm sure Will and Kate have their own side because they would have had their own reasonings for how they may have reacted to certain things. And again, I think it very much comes down to, at the end of the day, the difference just between British culture and American culture, and how sometimes things are a bit more allowable in American culture because, you know, American residents sometimes can be seen as a bit more brash and can be seen a bit more as like being very forthcoming and kind of telling it like it is sometimes. Like, they don't always beat around the bush a whole lot. Whereas the British, on the other hand, are going to be a bit more reserved, or at least that's the stereotype. And that's kind of like what they're known for, is being a bit more like stiff upper lip and keep your thoughts to yourself and don't say anything. And I think as a Canadian, I could say I kind of have a little bit of both. I got a little bit of that British side of us, the Commonwealth, influence us sometimes in ways of like just smile and nod sometimes. But then there's also that side of us that is very influenced by our neighbors to the south, in that we're just like, no, you know, we're gonna, you know, this is our space, this is our place, like, This is our opinion, so I think there's sometimes a war. Any fellow Canadians, maybe if you can weigh in, do you ever have that where you have that internal struggle of like, should I say something? Should I not? Because sometimes I don't want to be rude, but I also like want to say my piece. Maybe it's just both of our ancestries and our, it's that nature versus nurture coming out in us. As also a resident of Canada and being someone who has had the Commonwealth as like our, you know, we look to the Queen. The Queen is the one that kind of like sets some of our guides. We have to have like oaths sworn when we're like, you know, in parts of government. You kind of have to like make sure you're representing the Queen essentially. And now it's gonna eventually be the King when he is coronated, and that all switches over to King Charles. But I'm going to have a different probably opinion in that regard, so maybe your opinion will be a bit different. Maybe you side more with the Meghan Markle and Harry side of things, maybe you side more with the monarchy and British side of things. Maybe you don't fall either way and you don't really care and you think it's all stupid at the end of the day. Whatever your thoughts are, it's pretty polarizing sometimes. It can be a little scary to talk about it because it's kind of ventures into that whole political side, because it's literally politics of the monarchy and how they represent themselves and some of their mandates and things like that. Anyways, yeah, I've already said so much more than I've ever wanted to say about this subject. I think the story was fascinating in a lot of ways. Again, some of it was a little dry. There was some parts where I was kind of just not paying as much attention, but there were some parts that really gripped me and some parts that were very insightful, very interesting and eye-opening to see that side of Prince Harry. And he always got that rep of being like the bad boy, and sometimes it was for a reason. Sometimes it was justified. As he did have that little bit of rebel streak in him. He did have that bit of like flip off you kind of energy. And there's also sometimes maybe it was exaggerated and we don't know the full story. And even with him sharing his point of view, we're not going to always know the full story because he knows what has happened in his life. And honestly, he doesn't really have to answer to anyone else other than himself and the people that he loves most in his world. So all I wish really for him and his family is that they find some peace. They are able to love themselves and each other at the end of the day, because it can be pretty tough, some of the just vileness that goes at them. So they just sometimes need to kind of focus on each other, and hopefully they're able to find the happiness and the joy that they're both looking for. And I hope they've already found it. I hope this is just a sign that he was ready to let it all go. Because sometimes when you reach a point when you have reconciled in yourself, you almost want to reconcile outward to be like, okay, I've found this inner happiness and I've found this part where I feel good within myself. I need to almost bring that out to share that with the world and say, like, you know what? No matter how much you've tried to push me down, I'm still here and I'm still gonna be here. And that's all I hope for the two of them, because some of the trigger warnings of like the mental health and some of what Meghan struggled through with her miscarriage and things like that that was shared in this was really hard to read and was really hard to listen to and just imagine. So all I want for them both is just peace and happiness. And that's what I hope for everyone. So, I don't know if I've enticed you to read this book with what I have shared. I loved that at the end of the book it said like things about like where he was donating, and so like a lot of the profits are going to donation, because yeah, I'm sure he wants to get a bit paid, because come on, let us all be able to measure our work, like, let us all be able to know our value and have that represented where needed. So, you know, if he can get some bank, let him get some bank. But at the end of the day, too, I'm also grateful that he recognizes he is in a privileged position, even if things have gone kind of wonky with some of that. He still came from a world that's beyond our belief in some ways, so I'm glad that he's giving back in other ways. And some of the ones, it was very touching to hear that he is giving back in that way. So I'm grateful for that, because I don't think I've ever heard a memoir where they talked about where they were donating to. You know what? Whether that's performative or not, that's your own opinion. I think it's just a man who was born into a situation that none of us could understand, because he's got a very unique position. There are very few princes in this world, maybe more than we realize, but compared to the billions of people on Earth, there's not that many are in his position and can relate to his story at that type of level. So if we only let him be able to share his experience with others who share the same experience, that is very limiting. That is a very narrow way to think, and that is very isolating, and that's very detrimental in a lot of ways to force such isolation on people. Just because they have wealth does not mean that they are not human. And honestly, if he could share his wealth and donate a little of it back, that's amazing. Let's encourage it. Let's celebrate that in some ways, because at least he's giving back, and he's got a bit of his mother in his heart. So I think he is his mother's child, and it's very evident with how much he talks about her and how much love he has for her. So I hope he finds peace with that too, because you can tell he's still hurting very much about his mother. And as for some of the other things, I've seen some of the rounds of like the comedians poking fun at like some of what was said in the book. And yes, some of it was like, Harry, why are you talking about this? Like, why is this what you write in this book? But again, you know what? That's what he was dealing with. That's what he was experiencing at that particular moment in time. That's his story. If he wants to share it, he is well within his rights to share that story. And I think they took like such a little part of this huge like 15-hour book that he narrates. They took like a little like 10-second clip practically of where he talks about it and make it seem like that's what the whole book is about almost, or like that's like the most like, oh my god, if that's the part that you are going to pick apart because it sounded funny, or like, you know, he's talking about his royal member, that speaks more to the kind of crudeness of the world, I think, and just like where our attention is sometimes, because I think we should be talking more about what he was sharing in his experiences with how predatory that media can be, and how intoxicating it can be, and how manipulative it can be, and that we need to be careful on that. Like, are we not always saying how we need to make sure like the press is still free? How can the press be free if there's backdoor deals going on between the institutions and the media, and that they're not actually saying true stories, or they're mixing truths, or they're just coming out with falsehoods completely? Like, there's got to be some checks and balances. They're supposed to be representatives of the people for the people's good, and they're supposed to be doing it to give us actual important details, not just like, oh, the prince has, you know, been a bad boy and has broken up with a girlfriend or something, like, or stalking the family members to the point like it's absurd at what levels they go to get their stories. And when sometimes it's brushed off, or overlooked when sometimes it shouldn't be. There's certain things that have happened that I think Harry even kind of references. There's a lot bigger important things going on in his family, and yet they focus on the scapegoats, essentially. They focus on the ones that centralize the media and draw the attention away from the real kind of moments when we should be questioning. But it can definitely be polarizing, I think. But I don't blame Harry at all for coming out with it. So kudos to Harry for using his voice. We all have a voice. Let's try to use our voices to the best of our ability to make good things happen. Is honestly, I think what we all should strive to do is try to make the world a little better in any way we can. So I'm going to leave that because I just keep going on these rants about the institutions of the media, and yeah, and have like a whole 20-part series on that, when really it was a book review on Prince Harry's Spare. Oh, so the book itself I enjoyed, and it's 5 stars for putting himself out there and for having that very dreamy British accent that he narrated it in. Clearly I'm joking. That is a joke. That is not the only reason it is 5 stars. Did make it more enjoyable to listen to when it was in his voice. It definitely, I did enjoy hearing it in his voice, but it's clearly, it was just the content, and I think he got as real as he could. I think he honestly was as authentic as he believes to be. Like, whether there's some things that is kind of missing here and there, this is his side of things. I don't feel like he really kept too much behind, especially when it was ghostwritten by someone else. So it's going to go through some reviews, it's going to go through some edits. Probably could have even gone through some more edits to kind of get rid of some of the parts that didn't really need to be in there. But you know what? Overall, I enjoyed it, and it was an interesting read. And it might be something I pick up sometime in the future to maybe reread. And I would love to actually have the actual physical book too, because I feel like there's parts that he talked about that I would like to kind of go through again and kind of critique a bit more, or just like reflect on more, because he did have some like interesting parts that he talked about, and so that would be interesting to go through again. But I'm gonna leave that because this has been a very, very long video for pretty long book, though. It was 15 hours I listened to him, but it flew by. It flew by so quickly. He honestly, I will say that I have read some or listened to some memoirs where it can get very distracting, that you don't know what time they're referencing. It can get all over the place. So I think the ghostwriter did a really great job at ensuring that the pacing was well done, the layout was done, the writing style was done. Oh my god. I will also say too, oh god, I keep just adding on to this video. This video is going to be like 20 hours long. The language and the writing style, I don't know if it was a combination of the ghostwriter and Harry, but you could just tell that there was intelligence behind this book. You could tell that he is a very well-educated man, that he has a very scholarly background, and it's very influenced in the way that he speaks and some of his enunciations and the content of the book and the wording that was used as well. I did find sometimes it was very cute listening to him and his British accent, because he would say things like oregano or something like that, and then he'd be like, that's oregano for you Americans. It's just like, thanks Harry. Thanks. Because I don't know if that's really like, that's why I would love to see the book, because I don't know if like he just added that on because he knows his accent is like so strong and that he pronounces things in a very British way, that sometimes it was like, what are you saying? And then he'd say, like, oregano, that's oregano. Like, I was just like, oh, thank you, Harry. Thank you for explaining, because I had no idea what you're talking about. And he did that. There was a couple things, I can't remember them all, but there was quite a few things where he would say it in like the British pronunciation, and it was just like, oh, that is such a British thing to say. So that was funny. That made me laugh sometimes when he would do that. So I did appreciate that very much, and would love to see the book to compare that as well. So I was grateful for those little chuckles when he would have those moments. So very, very clear to see, very educated man. So I wish him all the best. And on that note, have you read Spare? Do you plan to read Spare? Or are you just gonna give it a pass? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I apologize if I offended anyone, or if maybe my opinion came across very passionate in a lot of ways. I think this is something that I do ruminate a bit with, especially being like a woman and just imagining some of the things that Princess Diana went through, where it led poor Princess Diana, and then to have that essentially echoed through time and possibly like almost happen to other women, whether that's, you know, Camilla or Kate Middleton or Meghan Markle. Like, we shouldn't be treating these women like that and letting people essentially stalk them to get a story. Like, that is scary, and I really think that something needs to be done to safeguard these situations so that we aren't having another Princess Diana happen, because that was tragic enough. And it was beyond tragic. The fact that it still impacts people to this day. You know, it's been like almost 30 years later, and her death and what happened to her with the media chasing her was horrible. And we don't want to see that again. And that is something that Harry expresses so much, is that's why he's taken up this arm so much, is because he doesn't want to see what happened to his mother happen to his wife and other people they loved. And just because while they went through it does not mean that we should be okay with that and just let that be the norm. Like, yeah, there were some pretty powerful moments when he spoke about that in this memoir, and he kind of talked about how just because that was the way things were, why should that be the way things continue? Like, why do we not progress forward? Do we not ensure that just because we didn't used to wear seatbelts and people died in car crashes from not seatbelts doesn't mean we don't wear them? Like, we wear them now. We make changes to protect people. We didn't used to wear helmets there until, you know, Jacques Plante wore the first face mask in hockey in like 1940. People now wear face masks in hockey to not break their noses and stuff. Like, when we see there's a problem, we see there's an issue, we find the solutions and we find resolutions to ensure those type of problems don't happen again and don't keep happening. So I do not think he is wrong for speaking out about that. And I think the ones that are the most angry that he does speak out are people that are just vile and going to be nasty anyways, or they're kind of people in the media kind of thinking that kind of approach is okay. Kind of questionable when those are the ones usually vocal about not doing that. So I keep saying I'm going to end this video and just stop. This has gone beyond the book review, and this is just like all of my thoughts of the monarchy and media and Prince Harry and his wife, and to just like put poor Meghan down as though, she's just Harry's wife. Like, Meghan Markle is an awesome woman in a lot of ways. I think she's done cool things, and I hope the best for her. I don't know her personally. I do not know her if I was to bump into her or anything, but I think from some of what I've read about from her as a little girl, some of the changes she made, like the Dawn dish soap, I think it was, or something like that, where it kept talking about how it was like the women in the kitchen, and she was like, dang, it's like the 1990s, why are you still saying the women in the kitchen as if women are the only people in the kitchen? Like, Meghan's just a strong, powerful, wonderful woman, and people are intimidated by that. That's a big part of why they hate her, is because they don't like that she is outspoken. Again, I don't know everything about Meghan. I cannot sit here and be like, defend her to the nth degree, because I have no idea who she is from freaking anyone else practically. I just know it's not really fair seeing the horrible things that have been said about her and anyone in the media. I think we need to do better overall. We need to do better on how we talk about each other and how we talk about people, and stop denouncing them, and like stop like minimizing them to some of their worst parts of them, or the parts that we think are the worst about them. Stop minimizing people and their efforts and their successes. Stop trivializing stop treating them as though they're not human. They are humans, and they deserve at least respect, and we all deserve to be doing that with each other. I think that social media, to get into like the commentary of social media, has been a cesspool of horrible thoughts sometimes. I'm sure if this video got any traction and the Meghan Markle haters came out, this comment section would very quickly fill with some really nasty things, and I think that's really sad, because where is the value in that? Where is the value in just spewing horribleness? I think sometimes we have to be mindful on what we're putting out there. There is enough awfulness out there in the world. We all deal with enough crap in our lives. Pardon my French. We deal with enough at the end of the day. Like, we all have our things to bear. We all have our struggles. Why are we going to then shovel it on someone else? Why are we going to try to make someone else feel less than? I think it's better and stronger when you can feel someone else, make someone else feel empowered, and make someone else feel awesome, because it's really easy to make them feel crappy, because we all already feel pretty crappy about ourselves sometimes. We already all have a little self-critic in ourselves that can take over if we let it. The really powerful thing and the really like cool thing is when we say cool things about each other. So my cool thing to say about Harry would be thanks for being brave. Thanks for trying to go against something you have known your whole life. That's scary. That is just scary to imagine, because there is comfort in the familiarity. There is comfort in just staying in your comfort zone. To go outside of it and go against the norm is terrifying. And so kudos to you for being brave to share your story and stand up for what you believe is right. And kudos to Meghan for being awesome and not letting it take her over, by fighting through and still being here. You are worthy. No matter what people say, you have value, and you're here, and that is important. And for anyone else who might be struggling with their own value or sense of self-worth, you are here. That is sometimes a victory in itself. If at the end of the day you can say, I got through that, that is amazing, because you've gotten through all the hard parts in your life till now, and you've gotten through all the good parts too. And life is not linear. It is not just all bad, and it's not just all good. It comes in happy moments and bad moments. Unfortunately, they balance each other out. So just remember that even when you think it's horrible and there's no escape, there is help. There's help out there in many different avenues, in different platforms, whether that's some type of crisis line or a family or friend who cares about you. Reach out to people you know and trust, and know that you are worth it at the end of the day, and I'm happy you're here. So thank you so much, honestly, for being here. It means the world, and I don't even want to give my usual outro of like, thanks so much for being here, blah, 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 because honestly, at the end of the day, just thank you. Thank you if you have watched this and you made it this far, especially depending on your opinion on this book. I just want to say thank you, and I wish you all the best, and take care of yourselves. Bye.